Our story begins on a lonely mountain path. A young man takes a heavy step forward. He's exhausted, out of breath, and out of hope. His own shadow feels like a stranger. He remembers a friend's kind words, and the shock of a sudden, cruel twist of fate. He's come to this place with a dark purpose, believing this is the only way out. He makes his final, decisive move. We flash back a few months to when it all began. An orphan, he had just lost his grandfather, the last family he had in the world. Despite being alone, he tried to keep living, but then, his parents' old debts came to collect. Apparently, loan sharks have zero chill. The boy could only watch in horror. His only hope was a strange school pamphlet, but even that couldn't save his home. The dojo his grandfather cherished was gone. He felt he couldn't protect a single memory. He wondered if this was the only way to see his family again. As his world fades to black, two strange figures declare their success. He opens his eyes, shocked to be alive, and finds himself in a completely different world. A knight and a priest welcome him with open arms. Our boy is understandably a little confused. Someone in the crowd complains he wasn't the beautiful girl they were expecting. He was summoned here by a glowing magic circle. A young noble shouts that this will bring his family honor. And now everyone is demanding an appraisal for the new arrival. Our boy sits dazed on the summoning circle. He's snapped out of his confusion by a voice. A smarmy-looking viscount introduces himself. The kid, Yoshima, introduces himself in return. He's told he's in the viscount's estate, and that he was summoned to be a hero, because this kingdom is facing a great crisis, with threats from dungeons and other nations, so they summoned transferees like him for help. Classic. Yoshima processes this typical isekai plot. He wonders if there are other heroes. And a way home. The Viscount explains that a great god grants them power, and now it's time to see what powers Yoshima has. A maid presents a scroll explaining transferees get special classes. Their potential is said to rival an entire army. With a flourish, the Viscount tells him to appraise himself. The results appear, and the room falls silent. The Viscount can't believe his eyes. He explodes in anger, calling it a class for street thugs, ranting that a summoned hero shouldn't be so pathetic. In this world, class and skills define one's abilities. But unlike the locals, transferees can't change their class. They get two special classes, but one of Yoshima's is problematic. The EXP boost is nice, but being unable to use weapons is a huge drawback. The whole situation feels unreal, like a bad game, and it's clear his summoners are deeply disappointed. Yoshima looks out the window, reflecting on his new station. He has to admit it. His class is weak. But he heads to the training grounds to test it anyway. As others watch in disbelief, he prepares to strike. He strikes the dummy, feeling no pain at all. His fist-bone skill seems to ignore normal physical limits. He realizes it's a passive skill, boosting his entire body. It seems to automatically consume magic to strengthen him. Though it's a simple skill, he sees its potential. A knight steps forward, offering him a sword. He's told to try and swing the blade, but he can barely even lift it. The knight takes it back with effortless ease. The restriction is absolute. He can't even use it to defend. The knight confirms his suspicions, unimpressed. He then challenges Yoshima to a bare-handed fight. Yoshima knows it's a losing battle. How can he win bare-handed? The knight drops his sword and takes a stance. Yoshima's eyes widen in surprise. The man beckons him forward, ready for a fight. He can feel it in his gut. This man is overwhelmingly strong. His stance is perfect, his center of gravity unreadable. He feels utterly outmatched with no hope of victory. But still, he wants to show this man what he can do. He's reminded of his grandfather's teachings. The knight sees the change and gives a confident smirk. Yoshima steels himself, though he hopes the knight will go easy. But the knight lunges forward with blinding speed. Yoshima barely has time to react. As the knight's hand closes in, he's caught in an instant. The fight is over before it even began. Later that night, under a full moon, Yoshima lies awake, replaying the day's events. He stares at an unfamiliar ceiling, remembering how easily he was thrown across the training grounds. He feels like a failure, a bad role in a cosmic gacha game. Is he destined to be powerless in this world too? He looks out the barred window, wondering what comes next. But despair won't help him now. He has to find a reason to live. Suddenly, he recalls the knight's words during their fight. A spark of realization cuts through his gloom. The knight had been impressed by his footing. He'd completely forgotten about his perseverance skill. Testing it, he finds his stance becomes incredibly stable. His skills, it seems, are all designed for unarmed combat. Just then, the door opens, and a man enters with a chained figure. The hooded person is thrown to the floor like a sack of dirt. Their skin is cracked and gray, almost like stone. The Viscount appears, smugly referencing Yoshima's earlier defeat. He gestures to the person on the floor, calling them garbage. The eye patch-wearing man clarifies that this is the worst kind of garbage. He explains this slave was bought specifically for Yoshima, some welcome gift. The slave's hand looks brittle, almost inhuman. They are afflicted with the rare and terrifying dragon's curse. The Viscount and his aide recoil, asking if the curse is contagious. The eye patch man smirks, saying it only affects those who form a contract. Without a moment's hesitation, Yoshima agrees to do it. The man is stunned by his immediate acceptance. He lunges forward to stop him, grabbing his arm, but it's too late. The cursed slave activates the contract seal. A wave of dark energy erupts through the room. Yoshima can only watch as the pact is sealed. The slave confirms the contract is complete. The eye patch man explains this was all for Yoshima's sake, a twisted way to show him the depths of their disappointment. He calls them a perfect match, a useless hero and a cursed slave. With that, the men leave them to their fate. Real stand-up guys. Yoshima is left alone, wondering what to do now. He looks at the person before him, seeing a reflection of his own despair, a life so painful that it's barely worth living. The slave stirs, their cracked skin showing immense suffering. He offers them a choice, the same one he once faced. If they wish for an end, he will grant it. He gently asks them what they truly want, and in that moment, he begins to question his own choices. He remembers the path that led him to that lonely mountain, the day he came home from school calling for his grandfather. But there was no answer. He found him collapsed on the kitchen floor. The rush to the hospital was a blur, but the doctors said there was nothing they could do. He remembers the weight of the rope in his hands, the feeling that there was no other way out. The final step into the void. He had convinced himself it was the only option, but was that really the truth? He remembers his school life, which wasn't all bad, but the fear of the unknown had been overwhelming. He was terrified of having to live on alone. He looks at the slave and assumes they feel the same way, believing that if they want to die, he should join them. He wanted to believe they were kindred spirits in suffering. But then a sudden realization hits him. But the slave's hand suddenly grabs his arm. He's pulled down as they struggle to speak. Through sobs, they manage to say they don't want to die. Yoshima realizes he was just projecting his own feelings onto them. He takes their hand, promising not to let them suffer alone. With tears in his eyes, he finally admits he wants to live too. He was just terrified of facing the world by himself. His offer had been a test, a desperate plea for a reason to keep going. In response, they offer a simple, comforting gesture. For the first time in ages, he falls into a deep sleep. The next morning, the knight is fuming outside his cell. He questions if Yoshima is even a real transferee. The Viscount rages that they couldn't have known he'd be so weak. The knight reflects on the boy's potential, if only he could wield a weapon. The Viscount complains that other territories summoned far better heroes. He's furious that his grand success turned out to be a total dud. He smashes his glass, demanding they summon a new hero. But his aide explains that's not exactly an option. Getting rid of Yoshima would mean the ruin of their entire house. The knight suggests they could simply train him up. But the Viscount has a much darker plan in mind. He wants the boy gone before the Council of Lords convenes. He then turns on the knight, Geese, blaming him for the situation. Geese can only clench his fist and accept the order. As the door closes, the plan is set in motion. Luckily for them, they have the perfect scapegoat. The Viscount sees it as the perfect opportunity for an accident. That night, under the same cold moon, Yoshima wakes up in his cell, unaware of the plot against him. The door opens to reveal his new attendant, bringing him a meal. The moon hangs high above the prison cell. Yoshima sleeps peacefully in his new companion's care. He dreams of a time long past in the dojo with his grandfather, a memory of his first lessons in martial arts, learning how to fall and how to get back up. He looks up at his teacher with pure admiration. His grandfather's kind and patient smile, the young boy tries to mimic the move himself, and with a little help, he sends his grandfather flying. The old man plays along, proud of his grandson's spirit. It was a moment of simple, perfect happiness, a bond forged through training and affection. He remembers the days he took for granted, a time he can never return to. His grandfather was always there for him, celebrating every small victory together. He remembers the warmth of his hand and the simple kindness that filled his life. In his sleep, he promises to never run away again. The next morning, they share a meal, a silent understanding between them. As a new day begins, Yoshima wakes up feeling surprisingly comfortable. He realizes he's been using the slave's lap as a pillow. Again, he immediately performs a jumping, sliding apology. Now that's commitment. His companion frantically tells him it's all right. He looks up, looking more like a puppy than a hero. The slave can't help but find their new master adorable. They note he seems completely different from the night before. He reflects on the darkness that almost consumed him, and the simple words that pulled him back from the edge. He finally admits to himself that he didn't want to die. He thanks his new companion for this realization. They tell him that he's the reason they could stand up again. Yoshima gently places a hand on their shoulder. They panic, worried about ruining his clothes. He decides it's time for a proper introduction, hoping they can understand his name. They feel it's improper for him to be so formal with a slave, even apologizing for their own lowly status. But Yoshima insists, flustered by the master-slave dynamic. Social etiquette is hard, even in another world. He sees them as his savior, not his property. And so they introduce themselves as Fas. Yoshima is overjoyed to finally know their name, but Fas is quick to correct his formal address. Now that introductions are over, he gets down to business. He knows they're in a dangerous situation, but he's determined to protect the one who gave him a reason to live. And honestly, a part of him is excited for the challenge. Fas confirms his suspicions. Things are indeed very bad. She believes the Viscount is already planning to kill him. Suddenly, Fas collapses in a fit of coughing. Dark energy begins to pour from her body and flows directly into Yoshima. He's hit with a wave of intense pain and exhaustion, but as he suffers, Fas begins to feel better. She can speak clearly, her voice no longer strained. He looks up, commenting on how beautiful her voice is. She's stunned, having been unable to speak properly for so long. He just gives a tired but happy smile. He wonders if the curse is transferring to him, just as the eye patch man warned. Fas panics, demanding he return the curse, but he insists it's just a little pain. She asks if he's sure, and he admits his skills are helping dull the pain. Suddenly, he remembers the appraisal scroll. He recalls the moment he was summoned, and the clothes he was wearing at the time. He'd stuffed the scroll into his inner pocket. He quickly apologizes and reaches into her robes. He pulls out the scroll, triumphant. Fas is, understandably, very confused. He realizes he just reached into her clothes to get it. Our hero immediately has a full-blown panic attack, smooth. She just wants to know what's going on. Her concern is for him, worried the curse will spread further. She warns him that another transfer could be fatal. But Yoshima just gives her a reassuring smile. He promises to be more careful. He activates the scroll, a new theory forming in his mind. He believes he can use his absorb skill to take the curse from her. Fas doesn't seem entirely convinced. He tells her to stay back, promising it'll be quick. If he takes on the curse, she'll finally be free. But Fas absolutely refuses to allow it. He points to another skill, self-decurse. She argues they have no idea if it's strong enough. She can't let him risk his life for her. Yoshima realizes they're at an impasse. She's surprisingly stubborn, so he agrees to table the discussion for now. He asks for more details about the curse itself. She only remembers being locked away in a room full of books. She explains she was isolated, with only an old woman for company. It was this woman who told her about the dragon's curse, but she knows nothing else, only that she was cursed as an infant. She apologizes for her lack of knowledge about her own condition. Yoshima changes the subject, suggesting he use the appraisal scroll on her. He nervously hides it, hoping no one finds out he basically stole it. The results are unhelpful. Her class and skills are completely sealed. Yoshima realizes this basic appraisal won't reveal the curse's true nature, but Fas recalls reading that higher-grade scrolls can analyze status effects. A new screen appears, showing the curse's invasion level is at 92. He realizes that number must have dropped after he absorbed some of it. His theory was right on the money. Suddenly, Fas drops into a deep bow before him. She sincerely thanks him for healing her earlier. Moved, Yoshima offers to absorb the rest of the curse now, but she flatly refuses. He's stunned by her stubbornness as she insists she's fine. Unseen by them, a guard listens in from the doorway. The guard enters with their meal, muttering about the hero's unusual tastes. He rationalizes it as a strange side effect of being a transferee. Sure, let's go with that. Yoshima frantically tries to explain it's for medical purposes. Fas just looks down, mortified by the misunderstanding. We cut to an emergency meeting inside Yoshima's head. He knows that denying the guard's assumption might hurt Fas's feelings. But another part of him argues that not denying it will get him labeled a creep. A more sensitive side worries about her already fragile self-esteem, while his heroic side declares that she's his savior and that's all that matters. But his social anxiety is screaming not to be seen as a weirdo. The chairman of the meeting decides his reputation is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what's truly important, and there is only one correct answer he can give in this situation. The council in his head unanimously agrees to go for it. Fas watches him, her gaze intense and unwavering, and so Yoshima declares he'd be happy to embrace her. The guard notes that rumors of transferees having strange tastes seem to be true. Yoshima stands firm, ready to defend his decision. The guard seems almost disappointed by the lack of drama. He gestures to the meal he brought them. As Yoshima enjoys the soup, the guard casually mentions it's poisoned. Our boy freezes, his entire world screeching to a halt. The guard says he'll be brief as they're short on time. He explains that every meal from now on will contain poison. Well, that's one way to spice up the menu. It's a slow-acting toxin meant to kill him before the council meets in 2 months. Yoshima is stunned, asking why they would want him dead. The guard explains it's because his class is seen as useless. They can't risk the embarrassment of presenting a thug hero to the other nobles. Yoshima wonders aloud if his class is truly that worthless. The guard finally introduces himself as Geese, the captain of the knights. Yoshima asks why he's revealing their entire evil plan. Geese claims it's just a whim, and he'd like to see the Viscount fail. A spark of hope ignites in Yoshima's eyes as he asks for help. Geese agrees, but only as much as he can without risking his own neck. He adds that he's certainly not doing it for Yoshima's sake. Yoshima immediately identifies this as a classic case of tsundere. He extends a hand, his hope renewed. He thanks Geese, promising to put his trust in him. He places a hand on the knight's shoulder, sealing their new alliance. Geese seems taken aback by the boy's sincerity. They shake hands, and Yoshima feels the calluses of a true warrior. The knight realizes he may have underestimated this kid. Geese snaps back to business, saying that while his spirit is good, he still needs training. Yoshima admits that he's a complete amateur at fighting. Geese proudly declares that turning amateurs into fighters is his specialty. He lays out the plan. In 1 month, officials will arrive to inspect the transferee. They'll use the chaos of the inspection to make their escape. The Viscount will likely assume they died, so they won't be pursued. Back in the cell, Yoshima knows the first problem is the poison. Outside the door, Geese listens in, making sure they eat their meal. He reminds Yoshima that he has to eat to have the strength to train. Yoshima asks if he can just use his detoxify skill. But Geese explains this poison is too high level for that to work, so much for the easy way out. Instead, he tells them they're going to the forest. Yoshima wonders if they're looking for some kind of antidote. Geese gives a sly grin, saying it's the perfect season for it. He tells Yoshima that he's a very lucky guy. But the term spawning season gives Yoshima a very bad feeling. A lone bird flies across the bright sky. They soon find themselves on a path leading into the woods. Yoshima feels like this is the true start of his new life. He points out a small creature, ready for his first real quest. He and Fass look to Geese for their next move. Geese explains the traditional method for curing this kind of poison is to make a poison spider into a familiar. An image of a massive, multi-eyed spider fills the screen. Well, that's not terrifying at all. Once contracted, the spider will absorb any poison from its master. Normally, taming monsters requires a special class. But in this world, familiars are more like powerful pets. For nobles and adventurers, they're a major status symbol. Geese puffs out his chest, clearly proud of his own unseen familiar. He gives Yoshima his mission: find a poisoned spider egg before sunset. He warns him not to go too deep, saying it's a task even a fool could handle. Yoshima looks up, feeling there must be a better way than taming a giant spider. Faz scans the path ahead, wondering what kind of beasts they'll encounter. The path is barely a meter wide. One wrong move could be his last. Suddenly, he realizes the forest has gone completely silent. Faz notices it too. The usual sounds of nature have vanished. A deep sense of dread tells him they should probably turn back. But his foot slips on the crumbling edge of the path. He's sent tumbling over the side. Guess that decision was made for him. His eyes widen in pure shock. He plummets down the steep ravine, trying desperately to break his fall as he tumbles. He reaches out, trying to grab anything to stop his descent. He braces himself, using his skills to endure the impact. But his momentum is simply too great to stop. From above, Fass worries that this task is impossible for him. Yoshima shouts for her to be careful, suspecting this is a trap. She can only clasp her hands and pray for his safe return. As his consciousness fades, he apologizes to Fass. He regrets not taking the curse from her when he had the chance. He opens his eyes to find himself caught in a massive web. Battered and bruised, he wonders if he's been saved. He looks at his scraped hands, his body aching all over. But his legs, though sore, seem to be fine. He looks around, realizing this web is far too big for a dog-sized spider. This feels more like it was made by something the size of a grizzly bear. And then he remembers Geese's parting words. A very specific warning not to go too deep into the forest. A warning he has now spectacularly failed to heed. A horrifying realization dawns on him. He's come face to face with the web's enormous multi-eyed owner. His entire body freezes in pure terror. A strange shifting sound comes from the beast. He covers his mouth, trying not to make a sound. The monster is even more horrifying up close. But instead of attacking, it turns its back to him. Yoshima braces himself, expecting the worst. He peeks out, confused by the creature's actions. He tries to scramble away, but he's stuck fast. His survival instincts are screaming at him to escape. He pushes against the sticky threads with his scraped hands. His jacket rips as he struggles to break free. Suddenly, something soft and foamy lands on his head. He looks down at the strange, bubbly mass in his hands and realizes it's an egg sac already hatching. Well, that's not creepy at all. The giant spider is laying more eggs all around him. He's caught in a bizarre mix of horror and wonder. A tiny army of spiderlings marches right past him. He looks back up to see the mother spider tearing apart the very web that holds her up. He realizes this means she's about to fall. The massive creature plummets towards the ground. Yoshima shuts his eyes, certain this is the end. The spider crashes down, narrowly missing him. A single spiderling bounces off its mother's back. He stares at the tiny creature, completely stunned. This was definitely not in the adventurer's handbook. He knows he has to get moving. He remembers that Fass is waiting for him. Finally free, he collapses against a tree, exhausted. He looks at his hands and realizes the foam has healed his wounds. He wonders if the foam has some kind of healing skill. He looks down at the tiny spiderling in his hands. Suddenly, the creature leaps onto his face, feeling surprisingly soft and fluffy. He's immediately smitten, thinking it looks like a sweet rice cake. Out of breath, he can't help but call the little guy cute. He realizes this might be his chance to form a contract. He offers a drop of his blood to seal the deal. The spiderling seems to understand, its eyes gleaming with determination. It gives his finger a gentle, almost polite little bite. A single drop of blood falls from his fingertip. A flash of light confirms the pact has been made. He pulls out a blank scroll, wondering if that's all it took. The spiderling jumps up, confirming their success. It lands on his head, telepathically greeting its new master. Well, that's one way to make a friend. Yoshima decides his new familiar needs a name. He settles on Fuku, a name inspired by good fortune. Fuku is overjoyed, happily accepting his new name. Yoshima laughs, realizing he has no idea if Fuku is even a boy. But now it's time to get serious. He has to get back to Fassi. The sun is already beginning to set over the mountains. Elsewhere, Geese puts out his cigar, assuming the boy has failed. He recalls that taming a poison spider is a rite of passage for new knights. It was a test of whether Yoshima could follow orders, even unreasonable ones. The nests are easy to find, so the task itself was simple. If he couldn't do it, it meant he had no will to survive. Geese considers that maybe the kid just ran away. But then he remembers seeing him in the training yard. And a different boy with different hair and skin. There was something about his expression, his aura. He realizes Yoshima reminds him of his own late brother. He remembers his brother, who always loved the Knights' parades. But his brother was taken by illness, leaving him alone. He saw that same despair in Yoshima's eyes in the training yard, the familiar look of someone who had already given up. But then, in an instant, something changed. He saw a natural stance honed by years of practice, a will to fight that defied his own despair. It was like seeing a wounded bird begging for a chance. Maybe this was his chance to pass on what he'd learned, to be the hero his own brother never got to see. He shakes his head, telling himself to stop being sentimental. Just then, a familiar voice calls out from the path. Geese can't believe what he's seeing. Yoshima runs back, shouting that he's made it. Back in the present, Yoshima wakes from a pleasant dream. Fass looks down at him, asking if he's okay. He smiles, remembering where he is, and that he's once again using her lap as a pillow. Classic. They share a quiet moment under the open sky. He finally emerges from the forest, shouting in triumph. He and Fuku celebrate their grand escape. Geese is less than impressed, demanding to know what took so long. Yoshima proudly presents his new companion, Fuku. He asks if this is really a poison spider, and Yoshima describes its massive mother. Geese shouts that he's describing an ogre spider, a mid-tier boss monster. He can't understand why such a beast would be so close to the entrance. He realizes the poison spiders must have fled the area to escape it. He sighs, telling the kid he's lucky to be alive. But just as he says that, a voice calls out from the darkness. The next thing we see, Geese is carrying an unconscious Yoshima back to Fass. Back in the cell, Yoshima apologizes for passing out, then asks where Fuku is. Something begins to stir under his shirt, and Fuku pops out, telepathically wishing his master a good morning. Fass is stunned, realizing she can hear the creature's voice. Yoshima proudly holds up his new familiar for a proper introduction. Fass is amazed, noting that telepathy is a skill for high-level monsters. She points out Fuku looks nothing like an ogre spider, but Yoshima explains he saw him hatch. She asks him to explain exactly what happened in the forest. After hearing the whole story, Fass is left utterly speechless. She then scolds him for being so incredibly reckless. Putting that aside, Yoshima decides to use the appraisal scroll on Fuku. He places his hand on the tiny spider and activates the scroll. The results reveal Fuku's class is Origin Spider, which sounds incredibly cool. Fass admits she's never heard of such a creature. She explains that some monsters are born as unique, powerful variants like Orc Kings. Yoshima compares it to a rare boss character, like a primordial dragon. Just then, Fuku's stomach rumbles, announcing that he's hungry. Fass mentions that their meal arrived while Yoshima was sleeping. He asks Fuku if he can handle the poison, and the little guy is ready for the challenge. They watch nervously as Fuku dips into the soup to absorb the toxin. He pops back out, declaring it was no problem at all. He then notes a strange energy flowing into him from his master. Yoshima reassures Fass that it's just the curse and it doesn't hurt. Having dealt with the poison, Fuku announces he's ready for a real meal. He suggests they can all share the now safe soup. But Fass suddenly stands, insisting she'll taste test it first. She declares it's a slave's duty to check for poison. A little late for that, but the spirit is there. She prepares a spoonful, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. Yoshima stops her, telling her that's her meal and she needs to eat. She's completely flustered, realizing he meant what he said about them surviving together. Yoshima says they have 1 month to get her strong enough to escape. Fass agrees, admitting she's happy he's willing to help. He's overjoyed that she's finally letting him absorb the curse. They're both nervous, admitting this is a first time for both of them. She worries her appearance is unpleasant, but he insists he's just grateful. He gives her a confident smile, telling her to leave it all to him. Fass is left blushing and completely flustered by his words. He tells her to sit on the bed, but she immediately panics. She completely misunderstands his intentions, offering to clean herself first. Her panic spirals as she thinks he wants something else entirely. This is getting awkward. Now shirtless, a confused Yoshima asks if she was just joking. She shyly asks him to turn around so she can have her turn. He kneels by the bed, ready to begin the curse absorption. With a determined look, he promises to break her curse. But nothing happens, leaving them both utterly confused. Suddenly, Fass clutches her head, realizing her terrible misunderstanding. She thought he wanted to do something else entirely. Yoshima is stunned as he finally understands her panic. Our boy realizes he may have created a very awkward situation. She breaks down, saying no one would ever want a woman like her. Yoshima can only watch, completely flustered. Fass continues to cry, lost in her own confusion. He gently reaches out his hands and pulls her into a tender embrace, kissing her forehead. Her eyes widen in complete and utter shock. He gives her a soft, reassuring smile. He tells her to listen closely to what he has to say. She realizes he meant what he said to the guard after all. He holds her, trying to explain that even if she's never cured, but he suddenly collapses as the curse absorption activates from the kiss. And with that, he loses consciousness. Fass holds him, calling out his name in a panic. She looks up, wondering why he would do this for her. Why would anyone show her such kindness? As she reflects, she remembers her own short, unremarkable life, a life she had accepted, until she met him. Her earliest memory is of being left at a small cabin in the woods, a cursed infant handed over to a new guardian. The woman who raised her was a mage, a human who lived deep within the forest. For a time, Fass believed she was human too, but her guardian told her the truth. She was cursed, and that because of the curse, she should have died long ago. The woman even offered to end her suffering as an act of mercy. Talk about tough love. Fass found solace in fairy tales, dreaming of a prince who would save her. One day, a family visited their home. They were there to buy medicine from the mage. A curious Fass peeked out from behind a door. She was spotted by the family's young daughter. Fass tried to offer a simple greeting, but the girl screamed in terror, calling her a monster. She ran away crying, leaving Fass completely shattered. Her guardian looked down at her, a question in her eyes. She asked why the girl would call her such a thing. And in that moment, Fass knew the answer. Her guardian began to weep. She knelt down and pulled the child into an embrace, holding her tightly through her own tears. Fass realized that for a human, touching her must have been agonizing. She finally understood her appearance was so monstrous it couldn't be described. Her memories were a haze of fever and pain. She would lie there, clutching the sheets in agony, but her guardian was always there, watching over her. The woman would sit by her bed, a constant, comforting presence. On good days, she was taught everything from medicine to reading. But 16 years after they met, her guardian passed away. Her final act was a gentle touch to Fass's cracked cheek. Fass wanted to follow her into the light, but something held her back. For the longest time, she never understood why. Soon after, looters from a nearby village ransacked their home. They dragged her out and handed her over to a familiar eye-patch-wearing man. And just like that, she was sold into slavery for a pittance. Her life took another dark turn, until she woke up to the sound of her new master's voice. She remembers being thrown into the cell before him and collapsing at the feet of a boy from another world. He offered her an end to her suffering, a choice she'd heard before. But for the first time in her life, she felt a surge of anger. In that moment, she finally knew why she couldn't give up. To die would be to betray the love her guardian had shown her. It would mean throwing away the life that woman had saved. She couldn't deny the time they had spent together. When she told Yoshima she wanted to live, he began to weep. She saw then that he was just as lost and in pain as she was, and she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could help him too. As he slept, she stroked his hair, making a silent vow. Her story was far from over. The most shocking part was the realization that her curse was breaking. She looks down at her hands, feeling the change, and she knows it's because of the boy sleeping in her lap. She feels she must repay the kindness that has been shown to her. She never knew that wanting to help someone could make life feel so bright. She wonders if this is how her guardian felt all those years ago. She looks down at Yoshima, realizing he's the one to blame for this. He's making her believe in impossible fantasies all over again. Suddenly, a furious voice echoes from the courtyard. Yoshima is startled awake by the commotion. It's Geese, and he does not look happy. Morning person he is not. Yoshima sits up, dazed, noting he's never been yelled at like this before. Geese grabs him by the wrist, ready to begin their training. From the window, Fuku telepathically asks if his master is all right. Yoshima closes his eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess. He opens them to see Fas and Fuku looking on with concern. He notices that Fas's skin is already looking much clearer. He reaches out a hand, feeling its smooth, uncracked surface. He tells her she's beautiful, and that she shouldn't be so cruel to herself. The next morning, Yoshima wakes up with Fuku on his chest. He places a hand on Fas's head, activating his appraisal skill. The results show the curse's invasion level has dropped to 62. He realizes that at this rate, she'll be fully cured before they know it. He then decides to check his own status. His skills have leveled up, and a new one, self-healing, has appeared. Fuku telepathically comments on how useful it is to see their stats. Yoshima is shocked to see Fuku's own level has skyrocketed. He nervously asks his familiar if he's been eating humans. Fuku frantically denies it, promising he'd never do such a thing. Relieved, Yoshima wonders what his tiny spider has been hunting. Fuku just says he's been hunting various things. That's not ominous at all. Yoshima decides it's probably better not to press the issue. He stands up, blindfolded, ready for the day's training to begin. He wipes the sweat from his brow, pushing through the pain. He practices his forms, honing his stance. His feet grip the ground, a foundation of pure will. He and Fuku train together, a blur of coordinated movement. His eyes widen, reacting to his partner's speed. Fuku lunges, drawing his attention just as planned. Yoshima teaches him the finer points of the technique. Fuku masters the move, earning his master's praise. He wakes to find Faz watching him, who asks to be taught as well. He admits his skills aren't exactly battle-ready yet, but she tells him his movements were beautiful. Flustered, Yoshima can only mutter a quiet thank you. He agrees, but says they must first focus on her recovery. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of their meal. A guard tells him to eat quickly. Geese is waiting for him. Faz whispers a quiet apology for being so forward. She bows deeply, vowing to repay the kindness he's shown her. He sees a reflection of his younger self finally being saved. The guard impatiently tells them to stop talking and eat. Yoshima smiles, thinking he's the one who owes her everything. Outside, Geese's patience has clearly run out. He demands to know why the boy is wasting his valuable time. After a solid hit, Yoshima realizes it barely even hurt. Geese strikes again, yelling at him for spacing out. Yoshima worries that he's actually getting used to this. He weakly asks if the knight could maybe pull his punches. Just a little. Suddenly, a set of greaves materializes on his legs, followed by gauntlets, a perfect gift from his tsundere trainer. But his excitement fades when he realizes how heavy they are. Geese puts a boot on his head, telling him to stop complaining. He's told to run until sunset, because he's not even worth the air he breathes. Geese's tough love approach is, shall we say, very tough. And so, Yoshima's grueling training begins under the knight's watchful eye. He pushes himself, the heavy armor weighing him down. He runs until he can barely stand, collapsing from exhaustion. The sun finally sets, ending the first day of his personal hell. Yoshima lies on the ground, completely and utterly spent. He's startled by a voice from above. Geese looms over him, his expression unreadable. He informs the boy that they're doing it all again tomorrow. With that, the knight turns to leave. Yoshima manages to gasp out a thank you for the training. Geese pauses, looking back over his shoulder. A faint, almost imperceptible smile crosses his lips. That night, back in the darkness of the cell, Fas waits patiently for his return. He collapses through the door, and she rushes to his side in a panic. She recalls hearing the guards mock him for being dragged to training. Both she and Fuku radiate pure, unadulterated protective rage. Yoshima sits up, reassuring them that he's not dead, just very, very sore. He gently scolds Fuku for having such murderous thoughts. Faz carefully tends to his wounds. She helps him change his clothes, a quiet intimacy between them. He's so exhausted, she even has to feed him. Now that's full-service care. He pets Fuku, apologizing to Faz for being a burden. He tells his familiar that he's being healed, so there's no need to worry. A new resolve hardens in his eyes. He gently places a hand on Faz's head. He can feel it. Her hair is starting to grow back. He asks if she wanted a head pat, completely misreading the moment. Smooth. Faz hides her face, completely mortified by his assumption. She can't even bring herself to look at him. But Yoshima is ready for another round of curse absorption. He's confused by her sudden refusal. She tells him to look closely at her face for a change. He stares, trying to figure out what's different. His first thought is that she's cute, adorable, but not helpful. She points to her ears, trying to guide him. And he finally sees it. She has pointed elf ears. She reveals she's an elf, a race she never knew she belonged to. In this world, elves are rare and highly sought after for their magic. Yoshima wonders if her being an elf is a big deal. But she worries that if her true cursed identity is revealed, they'll be separated by those who would exploit her. And suddenly Yoshima understands her fear. He suggests absorbing the curse, but leaving the shunned skill intact. He tells her he has a plan for that. He recalls the times he's absorbed the curse so far. Each time, the healing focused on the areas he was most worried about. It seems his subconscious is directing the flow of his power, which means he might be able to consciously control it. She agrees to his plan, and they prepare to try again. But he quickly tells her to rest for the day. He's clearly exhausted from training and needs a break. What a pro. Fuku wishes him well before heading out for a hunt. This leads to the age-old debate, who gets the one bed? Yoshima insists she take it, calling her his savior. Fueled by pure exhaustion, he gives her an ultimatum. As night falls over the estate, our hero finally gets some well-deserved rest. He wakes to find Fas massaging his leg. She explains it's a technique her guardian taught her to help with the curse. Since she can't do much else, she wants to help him recover this way. Fuku chimes in, promising to do his best to help too. And so, his companions tend to him as he rests. The next morning, however, there is no rest to be had. The days blur into a grueling training montage. He pushes his body past its limits, his skills activating under the strain. By day 7, he's pulling a boulder, because of course he is. On day 8, Fas waits for him, her skin looking clearer than before. On day 9, Fuku has grown, looking far more intimidating. Yoshima can barely feel the pain anymore. His whole body is just one big ache, but he can feel his strength growing at an impossible rate. He arrives late only to be met by a furious geese. The knight roars at him, asking who gave him permission to speak. He's tossed a wooden sword and told to get ready. The first blow sends him flying across the training grounds. Geese mocks him, comparing him to the successful hero in the capital. Yoshima wonders why a failure like him was summoned at all. Geese looms over him, promising to beat an answer out of him. He tells Yoshima that even a farm boy has better moves. The beatdown is relentless and unforgiving. Yoshima realizes the heavy armor is a fatal weakness in a real fight. His personal hell continues, each day a new trial. But Geese tells him this is good training and to get ready for more. He realizes Geese is demonstrating his own techniques to teach him. It's a practical lesson, but he can't keep up with the knight's speed. Geese even throws in a shoulder tackle for good measure. The knight scolds him for being unable to defend, pointing to the laughing crowd. The other knights mock him openly, and Yoshima feels utterly humiliated. Yoshima can only stare, stunned by the public beatdown. He realizes the Viscount and his aide are watching the whole show. Even some of the other knights seem to pity him. But through the pain, he manages a quiet thank you for the lesson. Later, he collapses and Fas rushes to his side in a panic. He's a complete wreck, only saved from broken bones by his skills. Back in the cell, she tends to his swollen limbs as Fuku watches. Fuku, however, is plotting some serious, adorable revenge. Fas explains that Fuku has gone to hunt monsters in the estate. He's apparently looking for a creature with healing powers to steal. Yoshima asks why she didn't stop him, but she has a plan. She argues that Fuku is just a baby and can't be blamed. Yoshima feels a wave of guilt for his thoughtless question. He quickly apologizes, saying he didn't mean to blame her. Faz looks away, flustered by the sudden apology. He admits that he didn't try to stop Fuku either. She clenches her fist, saying she understands Fuku's frustration. She declares how painful it is to be helpless, a feeling she knows all too well. She embraces him, desperate to repay the kindness he's shown her. But she feels powerless to stop his suffering. Yoshima realizes he's been selfish again. He never considered how hard it is for those who wait. He offers a sincere apology for his thoughtlessness. That night, neither of them can find any sleep. The air is thick with unspoken feelings and regret. Faz stays awake, worrying about Fuku's dangerous hunt. The next morning, she's already by his side, tending to his injuries. Suddenly, a noise from outside breaks the silence. Yoshima jolts awake, hoping Fuku has returned safely. A strange, dark substance suddenly drips from the window. It's Fuku, who collapses to the floor, battered and crying out in pain. Yoshima rushes to his side, asking in a panic if he's all right. He holds the tiny spider, who is completely unresponsive. Faz is overcome with guilt, believing she should have stopped him. She begins to panic, and Yoshima looks on, his heart sinking. He realizes this is his fault, and that his friend is hyperventilating. But then, a new idea forms. If he can absorb a curse, maybe he can absorb damage, too. He declares that he will take on all of Fuku's injuries himself. With tears in his eyes, he begs his familiar not to die. Faz watches in disbelief as the wounds begin to transfer. She realizes Fuku is actually starting to heal. Fuku telepathically asks if his master is taking on his pain. Yoshima grits his teeth, determined not to lose anyone else. He places a hand on Fuku, completing the transfer. Both Faz and Fuku look on, worried for their master. Fuku proudly announces he's brought back the healing power he was looking for. Yoshima celebrates their success as Faz asks if he's okay. But the celebration is cut short as he coughs up a mouthful of blood. He looks at his hands, realizing he's taken on all of Fuku's internal damage. Both of his companions cry out in a panic, asking why he's bleeding. The world begins to fade to black around him. He tries to reassure them, saying not to worry. He tells them not to blame themselves before finally losing consciousness. Sometime later, Yoshima is teaching Faz about magic after his own training. He wonders if her natural talent is because she's an elf. She explains that magic is like consciously controlling the flow of blood, and that activating skills requires manipulating that magic beforehand. He recalls Geese's fighting style, realizing he must be sensing magic to time his attacks. Faz tells him to try and sense the heat coming from her body. Yoshima stares at her, completely lost in thought. She gets flustered, thinking he just called her beautiful again. He quickly agrees to take the training seriously, not wanting to see her get hurt. Meanwhile, Fuku has been busy with his own special training regimen. Faz asks him to pinpoint where the magic is flowing in his body. He correctly identifies the flow, a small but crucial victory. She tells him his training is clearly paying off and suggests he rest for the night. But she insists their lesson isn't over just yet. She tells him to watch as she consciously moves her own magic. She gives him a confident smile, promising they'll practice until he gets it right. Yoshima realizes he's in for another sleepless night. Poor guy can't catch a break. From that day on, his sparring sessions with Geese improve dramatically. He rediscovers the joy of martial arts he once shared with his grandfather. Geese calls an end to the day's training, telling him to focus on the curse. He focuses, pulling more of the affliction from Faz's body. He collapses into bed, determined to free her before their escape. Faz watches with concern, begging him not to push himself so hard. He pushes himself to the absolute limit, absorbing the curse until he nearly faints. She gently places a hand on his head, a silent thank you. And though he's trapped, he feels a sense of peace, because for the first time in a long time, he's not alone. The next morning, he wakes to find her watching him. He's once again struck by her quiet, mysterious beauty. She blushes, wishing her master a good morning. He asks if she's been training, but she calls it simple rehab. He stretches, ready to face another day of grueling practice. With Faz's help, he's actually excited to show Geese his progress. But when their meal arrives, he's told today is a day off. The entire night order has been dispatched on a mission. As he prepares to eat, he asks Faz how she's been getting her meals. She quietly admits she hasn't been eating at all. She explains she never had much of an appetite anyway. Yoshima realizes her hunger is returning as the curse fades. Faz admits she was too ashamed to say anything. He insists that she's the one who needs the food to recover. And so begins the great argument over who gets the single meal. He asks where Fuku is, and the spider telepathically understands the mission. He tells her not to push herself, but she assures him Fuku will be fine. With the day off, he decides to focus on absorbing the rest of the curse. But Faz protests, insisting he's the one who needs to rest for a change. He points out that she's just as guilty of neglecting her own needs. She gives a knowing smile, admitting that he's right. She then declares that she's actually a very cunning woman. An awkward silence falls between them on the small bed. Yoshima decides to break the tension with some light exercise. He internally curses his inability to say what he really feels. Teenage angst. Suddenly, Fass reaches out and takes his hand. He turns to her, confused by the sudden gesture. She shyly asks if he'll tell her more about himself and his world. Our boy's brain immediately short-circuits from the sheer cuteness. She wants to know everything about the life he left behind. And so he tells her about his school, his friends, and his grandfather. He explains his world is one of technology, not magic and alchemy. She listens intently, her gaze fixed on him. And then she asks the one question he's been trying to avoid. He admits he doesn't know, too focused on just surviving the present. He wonders where home even is for him anymore. Trapped in this cell, the future feels impossibly distant and dark. He realizes he has no home left to return to. He gently pats her head, turning the question back to her instead. She explains that on good days, her guardian would read to her. He asks what kind of books she liked, but she shyly calls it a secret. She finally admits she loved fairy tales about princes saving princesses. Yoshima thinks that's adorable, but Fass insists she's no princess. He tells her she's beautiful enough to be one, and that she's the one who saved him. She says that if she were a princess, she'd rather be saved by him, because he was the one who was there for her that night. Yoshima looks at her, admitting he's the one who's been saved all along. She says she doesn't want to be a princess, she just wants to be strong enough to support him. He realizes it's not enough to just be saved by the people you care about. Fass gives a warm smile, asking if she's being too greedy. He agrees he's no prince, but he's glad to be the one by her side. Their conversation is interrupted by something dropping from the ceiling. It's Fuku, who has returned from his hunt with a triumphant entrance. He's brought back a feast of smoked meat and pickled vegetables. Mission accomplished. They share the meal, and Fass admits it's been ages since she's tasted meat. Yoshima notices 2 empty jars, realizing Fuku has been absorbing the curse for her. Fuku telepathically tells his master to keep it a secret. Yoshima puts a finger to his lips, agreeing to the pact. He gently pats his familiar as Fass finally gets some peaceful rest. The next day, a new challenge awaits in the courtyard. Geese is back, asking if Yoshima is ready for the next phase of his training. The knight unleashes a powerful slash, sending a wave of energy at Fass. Yoshima watches, his hair blown back by the sheer force of the attack. His eyes widen, a sudden realization dawning on him. For the first time, he can actually see the attack's trajectory. He realizes his magic training has unlocked a whole new level of perception. Guess he's finally leveled up his protagonist powers. Geese is impressed, noting how much better his footing has become. But he warns that dodging and attacking are 2 very different things. A quick diagram shows the problem. Yoshima's attacks are easily blocked, leaving him wide open for a beatdown. The problem is his lack of raw firepower. Even if he tries to grapple, a skilled opponent will just use his momentum against him. He regrets not training harder, not making excuses about his lack of talent. 30 days have passed since he arrived in this world. The time for their escape is drawing near. Fass continues her own training, honing her control over magic. But Yoshima feels he hasn't gotten any stronger at all. Geese tells him to stop thinking and just punch the wall. Standard therapy. And so he unleashes his frustration on the solid stone. He's been at it for hours, mindlessly practicing his forms, pushing his body until there's nothing left to think about. He realizes this kind of repetitive training suits him perfectly. His session is interrupted by a young knight with a message. The knight praises him for keeping up with Geese's brutal training. He explains that even though Geese is holding back, it's still an incredible feat. The boy adds that the entire Knight Order is secretly rooting for him. He admits they used to mock him, but now they're just pretending. Because they have to, he says, offering his sincere support. Yoshima looks up, wondering if this is a sign of respect. His eyes widen in disbelief. The entire order stands behind the young knight, a silent show of solidarity. Our boy is completely overwhelmed by the gesture. He bows deeply, moved to tears by their support. Geese watches from afar, noting the kid has a talent for seeing the good in people. 2 knights inspect the wall, amazed he could do this without skills. They agree it's more than enough power to break a person. Geese reflects that Yoshima wouldn't keep taking hits if he didn't believe his own attacks were useless. The knights stare at the crater, admitting they wouldn't want to face him one-on-one.